It's that time talking FSU football with all of you each and every Wednesday night, 6 Eastern, but you can get it multiple times per week with George Itis from the Renegade Report, breaking down FSU football. Leave those comments and questions. We'll get to it. George, how you doing tonight?
Hang in there, man. Went and did my patriotic duty yesterday. Happy to be here to give folks a bit of a break from the politics. I know you voted. Jim was out there womaning a poll station yesterday. So proud of everybody. I know Chris went out and voted. I know James voted. I know Tiny Hat went out and made his vote. Pretty sure Deshaun voted too. So proud of all my people that went out there and voted. Politics isn't what we do, so we won't talk one side or the other. But happy to be talking about some football. And with that winding down, seems like we'll start to get some more people as we count down the last 3 or 4 weeks of hell for Florida State. There's all kind of interesting stuff that's coming up. So it's going to be busy here in the next month. But yeah, still 3 more weeks of tough stuff. But plenty to talk about between the college football playoff, the coaching situation, where it's going to go forward. And we didn't even talk a little bit about previewing Notre Dame, but it's like I didn't even preview UNC last week because it's like, well, here's what's gonna happen. It's like it's tough, but how are you doing, Mark? How are we doing over there? You in Daytona right now?
We're doing well. Absolutely doing well. Yeah, I guess it took a Florida State team this bad for Mac Brown to finally win a game against FSU.
Oh my goodness.
This is what it took.
That picture of him with his hands on, Mike Norvell's shoulders and like pretty much consoling him in like a 5-minute conversation. Like it really, you saw that going on in pregame and you knew you had no chance. Really tough spot for Mike Norvell. You try not to hammer on him, but at this point in the season, it's what I've told our audience. The reason we're not doing a ton of shows, like I'm not in the business of just crapping all over my program. But you're to a point now in the season where you want to talk about lame duck. That's what's going on. The offense isn't trending the right way. It's getting worse. Everything has got worse since Georgia Tech. Worse. You get the one win. You piled up this roster. You lost a ton of guys to the NFL. You come into year 5. You talk about the strongest, the fastest. Could have won 4, 5, 6 games, and the conversation's a little different. But everything you've built up over that time period, all the relationships you built, all the momentum, the reputation of your program, it's all gone. It's all gone. It's like, the Rocky movies. Everybody loves Rocky. Rocky 1, he comes from the streets. His coach, gets his wife in a good house. Rocky 2, he's making millions. Rocky 3, the house is getting bigger, and then he loses it all. And he goes down. He's just old, beat up Rocky, and he has to fight his way back to the top. Beats the Russian, all that stuff. Like that's where Florida State is. They're not Rocky on top of the world with a heavyweight belt being like, okay, now we can get this 5-star. And they've just got to be able to go out there and scrap. And that was the issue with this staff from day one. It was never that staff. It came along during COVID 2021. Like you can't ignore that. That happened. But at the same time, you've got to have guys that can come in and recruit regardless of the record, regardless of anything. They just have to be recruiters. And it's just not there. So some changes have to come. And there's just, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we, go crazy and beat Notre Dame, or maybe can take Florida because they do have issues, even though they are looking to get better and better, have been getting better week by week. You got about 3 options. The nuclear one, fire Mike Norvell. I don't think anybody really believes that with the $65 million tag on his head. But it's a conversation to be had now that you're 1-8, headed for 1-9. Looking at 1-10 since the Georgia game, however you want to talk about it. You can't, when it goes that bad, you have to discuss it. People floating Deion Sanders' name out there, Lane Kiffin, things of that nature. I just don't know if Deion is a long-term college football coach, even any kind of coach. Will he go try to follow us under the NFL? I will give Deion his props. He's done a lot better this year than I thought. Although I think kind of what I thought about the Big 12's strength of schedule and the depth of that conference is also, a lot lower than people realize. But yeah, he's killing it. He's doing a good job. Could he possibly do it at FSU as a CEO? Maybe. I just don't believe he has the dedication or is that into it and invested into college football to want to come to Florida State and make a 5-10 year commitment to do all this stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong about him before. So we'll see. That's, of course, that's the least likely nuclear option. Not many people think he's going to get fired this year. The other two is, an overhaul of staff. You do a complete overhaul, a heavy overhaul, or are they just going to get rid of one or two coaches and try to just, okay, they went 13-0. We're giving them benefit of the doubt. This is just a bad year. I don't think that's an option. I think if that happens, if they just change a couple coaches, give them the benefit of the doubt, just roll with Mike, and he did it once, he can do it again. It's the beginning of the end. I truly believe he can. He could come win 6 games and then 10 games, but this is Florida State. Like, that's okay at Memphis or, Indiana, wherever else. At Florida State, the standard is higher. So you're in a position now where you have got to change the staff up and to be able to strike a balance of guys that are young, guys that go get it and go recruit. Right now, we've just got a bunch of youth ministers just all over the team. And there's this whole thing about wanting to get good people, people that don't drink, and virgins, and this whole kind of narrative around the culture and everything around this team. Like, I loved it. I was proud to be a part of it. I love how spiritual they are. They break down in like groups to do prayers and stuff before practices and games and everything like that. But there is a level of college football that you just kind of have to play in the gray areas. You have to find a guy who maybe isn't a good kid, or maybe is a good kid, but he's got something terrible going on at home, so he's in trouble. You've got to go help that guy and figure out how you can get him into your program and make it work. And not even so much that the tip-top guys, the Jeremiah Smiths, I think they're so good and so far removed from the streets or anything, but that's another part of it. You've got to be able to go get the tip-top athletes and sell them. You have to really sell them. It's like, when you're trying to, hire an actor or something, and you bring them to the studio, and you've got all the famous actors that you employ, all your best agents, all your best food out there. That's what these recruitment trips are. And the hard sell of, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is what we can do for you here. That doesn't work when you put on the film and see what these receivers are doing. And it's real easy to point at just this year, but it was the same in 2020, 21. Then you finally get the portal guys in 22 and 23. Recruiting, it's got to be fixed. I made the argument last night on my show, like, there's a chance this could have worked, because they did, due to COVID, due to their nature, all those things, they built up to where this 2025 recruiting class, it was going to be a top 10 class. Make no mistake. They had 2 top 100 D-line and offensive linemen committed. They had 3 top 25 wide receivers, like 14 or 15 commits, and it was 99% blue chips. Like, they were on the way, and that was before the season or at the beginning of the season. But that was all built up due to a program in 4 years. That's out the window. And this staff has proven over and over and over and over again, they cannot go out there and sell recruiting to Florida State just on the logo. Like, they have to have a good team behind them. It's just how it is. They've missed on so many top guys, getting flipped at the last second. To this point, they fixed it in the portal. But, this team can turn it around. They can do this, they can do that, but there are no more excuses left. And it's just tough listening to the way that Mike talks. He's giving you the coach talk thing of, like, everybody's trying their best, and we're not going to let any coaches go, because I think the best thing to do is to coach these guys every day. And I've seen it happen over my whole career. And it's like, we get it. And I trust you, and that's what you got to do. But at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. At some point, like, okay, how much worse could it get? How much better are you expecting it to get? I'm not one of these people that says you have to fire the coaches now to get ahead of it. I don't know how much that helps you, firing the coaches before the end of the season, because all the good teams' coaches aren't leaving early. So, you can't hire them until they're done. But, I would like to see him maybe, I don't know, get on a coach's ass in a press conference, pick out a player to really get on him. We've talked all year about on the sidelines how usually he's animated, tearing people up, ripping them, this and that. But, whether it was the college football playoff, whether, the snub, whether it was getting beat by Georgia and all those guys deciding not to play, whatever it is, something broke this staff. They lost sight of the evaluation and kind of what's going on in the rest of the country. To hear Alex Atkins talking about he's got to go back to square one and relook at all his evaluations and stuff. You've been with these guys for 5 years. Like, these are your guys. They got 13,000 snaps and you misevaluated them all. Jordan Travis, it's something that you've known me for a couple of years now, Mark. How much did I talk about how people don't realize how much Jordan Travis leveraged that line of scrimmage and put defenses in binds? Like, he didn't even have to run the ball. It's just the fact of that he could on third down or whatever the case may be. It made the blocks for all those guys better. And even when they had breakdowns, he would make these crazy escapes. But at the same time, in 2022, you had a decent run game, bit of a step back last year, but also guys all just terribly hurt. Was that luck? Turns out, no. That's just the shape. These are just the bodies we have. There was a lot of hope. It was built up that we were going to have that 22 run game maybe a little better. You're super, seniors across the board on the offensive line, and it just hasn't been. You missed on quarterback. You missed on several things. We can go over that all day long, but yeah, this. Don't look for hope. Anybody that's telling you this or that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, it's just pretty much BS. But there's a lot of conversation and posturing on, what's going to happen. Which change will it be? They're going to change the head coach. They're going to change 2 or 3 guys. They're going to change 4 or 5 guys. I guess the next thing would be, like, what's been holding back these coaching decisions? Like, how come Shannon kept his job for all these years? How come they didn't? How come it was only Woodson? There's so many questions. Is it the administration saying, Mike, you can't fire these guys? Mike, you can't hire these guys? Or is it Mike telling the administration, no, I want to keep these guys? If it's Mike that said that, and Mike is the one that's calling the shots, Mike is the one that gets to decide how many coaches leave, et cetera, I'm not in too bad of a mood about the program. Like, we can get the right coach in there and fix it. If Michael Alford is getting pressured by administration and boosters and things of that nature, that we have to keep Dugans, we have to keep Hagens, we're only going to make so many changes and we're not going to give Mike the ability to make these changes, then FSU, it's really bad. You're looking at Cleveland Brown stuff, and it's really scary because all this came to a head in 2017. Michael Alford took over the boosters after Norvell left, or after Fisher left. He eventually isn't like they hired him as the athletic director while he was the head of the boosters. He went straight from there over. It was my belief from people I talked to him, what I thought, that he revolutionized the booster system. Back in the old days, the boosters had all the power. It wasn't really the AD and the head coach. Like, when it came to coaches and things like that, outside of Bobby in his prime, like, Jimbo did not have that. It was like, oh, this is how much you get for this. And that was a huge problem. So I thought we were past that. I thought Michael Alford could see farther ahead and like knew what it takes, and I still do. I think that's BS. But if that narrative comes out, and you only change 1 or 2 coaches, and it turns out you didn't have the money or you weren't willing to do this or that, that's truly scary. I don't think that's what it is, but that would certainly be a huge problem.
Folks, as Florida State fans, you can forget about the current situation for maybe a couple hours. You can pick up my new book here, Disputed National Champions. You can live back in the 1990s for a couple hours. Look through the book. Check out the book. Jackson has left the link there in the chat. So, yeah, this is a history book, but it's way more than that. So we go through the 1990s. Each season during the 1990s, we dissect all the storylines, all the major players that made the championship race what it was, all the big games, how the championship race concluded down the stretch, the postseason berths that were named, how the postseason went, how the vote went, and then talk about, who got left out, who got screwed, who got elevated that didn't deserve it, all those sorts of things. Did the vote make sense? And then what was the impact on that season toward the rest of college football? But way more than that, we take each of these seasons during the 1990s and we put it into the future eras. So we take every season, 1990, 91, 92, on through 1999, that you're pretty familiar and fond of course, 1999. And we put those into the BCS formula. and let you know what it would look like. We put it into the 4-team college football playoff formula, how it would have looked like and what the results would have been. The 12-team, and then, of course, we got a proposed 14-team. So give it a look. The link's there in the chat.
Definitely Florida State fans, 93 and 99, you don't get any better than that. So definitely check it out and maybe hear a story or a line, whether it's about Virginia Tech or Notre Dame or whoever from those seasons and kind of how that went. It's a very good read. So go check it out for sure.
Appreciate that, George. So let me ask you this. When you bring up the coaching staff, so either none of them are getting the job done this year because there's no unit on this team that's performing up to the standard, or
maybe one.
Maybe they're okay. So let's start
DBs and special teams. We'll give it DBs and special teams, probably the only two that are close.
Okay. Because I was going to give it not really a two-part question, but number one, is there anybody doing the job from a coaching standpoint? We can't assume that everybody has just sucked because the team sucks, that everybody, just like there are individual players that are having decent seasons, that doesn't mean every player is having a bad season. So if you were going to keep any of these guys, like who do you think, is there anybody on this coaching staff, either one of the coordinators that you think, maybe even if they're not having a great season this year and haven't been able to get the most out of their unit this season, that they've shown in the past that, yeah, we can do an overhaul, but I'd like to hang on to that guy or that guy?
Yeah. And this lands right on kind of my preferred scenario. In my heart of hearts, I would prefer Mike to stay and wipe it all out, hire 2 new coordinators, the whole 9 yards. But in my mind tells me that's not going to happen. But what my hope is that it'll land somewhere in the middle with 4 or 5 guys to be replaced. I brought up earlier about how you have basically the same guy outside of Pat Surtain at every position, same recruiting style, that youth prime minister, really nice, not going to say the S word or the F word and all that stuff. Not to hate on that type of person. You might fall in that category. I love it. But I'm sure you're probably wouldn't be happy to go to these different high schools and have to kiss these high schools kids' butts, for 80 hours a week when you're also a football coach. And I don't think Odell does either, and that's fine. But the big thing is, I think basically anybody could go, but the people at the top of the list are going to be Randy Shannon on defense, Ron Dugans on offense. Those are the 2 tip-top guys who, it's pretty cut and clear. They're gone. But the important part to me is that you do bring in those young, hot recruiter type guys. You have to. There has to be some kind of balance. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is you need somebody to hold the other count, like whatever coaches remain, you need at least half guys to come in, 4 or 5, to hold them accountable. Because there is a blindness in this program between Mike Norvell and all his guys, whether it's because he delegated responsibility to the offensive defensive staff and they let him down, or it's all his fault, whether it's the general manager and the recruiting efforts that misevaluated. So yeah, that's for me why it would be a nightmare if they only changed 1 or 2, because you have to at least change half to bring some accountability. You can't bring a couple yes men in there or nothing's going to change. Nothing. So I gave you the first 2. The next 2 or 3 are the toughest. On offense, Alex Atkins has a show clause for the next 2 years because of the recruiting thing. So it's going to be hard for Mike Norvell to find a position where he lands on his feet in a good spot. It's a big point of contention. Alex, Mike, they're super tight. People aren't really expecting him to leave. But what I do expect out of him, if he's going to remain, in my scenario, what needs to happen, if you're going to hire 4 or 5 coaches, you're going to have to bump him down to an offensive line coach or a run game coordinator. And then you're going to have to bring in an offensive coordinator. Brendan Marion, UNLV, is just a popular example. Who knows who it will be. But if you could bring him in, passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator, you have Alex Atkins. The next 2 on the chopping block are going to be Chris Thompson and Yak. Out of those 2, personally, I think Chris Thompson would be the guy to go. And then over on defense, we're at 3 right now with those guys. Your 4th and 5th guy, Odell. What do you do with Odell? It's and this is one of the rumors out there that the administration has told Mike he's not allowed to fire Odell. He's going to stay just as long as he wants. If that's true, I've got a legitimate problem. And it's Cleveland Brown stuff, because it's you've already made it through 3 coaching staffs. Like, how much of a benefit of the doubt do you need? Like, coaching them up and doing this and that, that's great. You're coaching up who you have every year, but somebody has to recruit them, unless you're going to hire a 3rd defensive line coach. Papucci's, he's coached his guys up, and it's a similar thing. It's like, you can't have 2 guys that just coach and don't recruit. So whether it's Papuchis or Odell that gets gone, you're going to have to bring in a guy with that swag, with that young kind of thing on defensive line. The linebacker coach, the dream guy would obviously be Derek Nicholson from Miami. But I already said Pat Surtain. He looks great. There's rumors of him going elsewhere, or he could possibly be that 5th coach because he's going to the NFL or gets an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator job at a bigger school. But yeah, I think for the most part, the guys that I wouldn't expect to go that are actually safe, right or wrong, I think Adam Fuller stays. Yak has a good chance to stay. Obviously, Mike Norvell, and then one of the 2 of Odell and Papuchis. My personally, I prefer it to be Papuchis and just move him to special teams coordinator, or really the same position. He can be special teams / D ends, and I want him to bring in a defensive line coach. You know, somebody that coaches the whole defensive line, recruits the whole defensive line, is an ace recruiter. Somebody like Brad Long back in the day, yada yada. But yeah, if you don't, if that stuff about Dugans and Odell is true, and you only get rid of 1 or 2 coaches, yeah, bad news bears. I want to give FSU, Michael Alford, the administration, Mike Norvell, more credit than that. But these coaches are so set in their ways, and you know, you build up this faith of building a program and your whole book of how you do things over 20 years. We've seen it time and time again. Nick Saban is the only one. Nick Saban, and I'll give Jim Harbaugh a bit of credit because he did change his staff up. He went back to his original thing. He kind of changed. He started out as that power, run game, and then he switched, spread it out a little bit as the offenses opened up. Then he came back to his thing. But as far as completely changing like their identity of their offense and their philosophy about using transfers and things like that, Nick Saban is the only one that I've seen successfully truly flip that around. And Brian Kelly, same thing. He got it back on track, but it's just LSU is just Notre Dame. I mean, it's the same thing with a little bit better athletes. So can Mike actually change it? I don't know. What I'm hearing in the press conferences, I don't have a ton of confidence. But yeah, I think if you're going to see anybody go, Odell, Cannon, Dugans, and then you look at Thompson, possibly Surtain, possibly Yak. So there's your 6 guys. The first 4 most likely, but the other 2, Yak and Surtain, there's a chance they could be gone too. Because just like tight end with Thompson, running back, you got to slip somebody in there that could really recruit. And I like Yak, and I think he relates to the kids better than most of these guys on the staff, if I'm being honest. But he doesn't have that X factor to be a lead recruit. The fact that Alex Atkins is the best recruiter on the staff, and he's got all these recruits, that it makes that situation even tougher. But it just goes to highlight how poor this coaching staff is at just selling the program and just recruiting on, period. But anyways.
Every Wednesday, folks, right here at the Voice of College Football with George. Sometimes we get James, sometimes we get Chris. Of course, Den Media Group with James Coleman, and Spear Addicts with Chris. Also want to highlight, because we certainly talk about this every week, and we let you know that you can find Florida State football coverage with George at the Renegade Report, and we dropped the link in the chat. But just to give it a look right there, that's what you're looking for right there on YouTube with the Renegade Report. So there's a look at George's YouTube account. So it's easy to find Renegade Report right here on YouTube. And then also you can follow what George has to say about Florida State football on Twitter as well. That's what that looks like right there.
Appreciate you, man. Y'all got we're at 2,800 subscribers, so kind of slowed down here with everything going on this season, but we're starting to pick up. Like I said, once we get to the end of the year, it'll be back to every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday at 7 Eastern, and we're going to have a ton of guests, ton of stuff to talk about. But yeah, we appreciate it, and yeah, you keep me regular. It's like it's really tough right now, so I appreciate you keeping this thing going every Wednesday and kind of having a conversation that's just me and you. It's fun, But yeah, I wouldn't mind James and Chris showing up to let me sit back and
Take a
listen to
breath.
them a little while too.
No doubt, no doubt. We talked before we started to record tonight. Of course, the college football playoff rankings. You Florida State fans know what the deal is. Last year, you were all about this, and this was the topic each and every week after we got to the place where they started revealing these rankings on Tuesday night. And of course, none of you could care less about it at this point in terms of being a Florida State fan, but many of you college football fans, you still love the game and love the rest of the games and are interested in what's going on. But obviously, George, as you look at this, you've got some thoughts beyond the exact teams that are involved. You know, we certainly can talk about that. But in regards to what has been the big fight over the last what's pushing a couple of years now with Florida State in the ACC, Clemson in the ACC, and the grant of rights and all that business going on. And this is kind of playing out in front of our eyes in regards to the perceived and real value of the ACC.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, did I lose you?
Yeah, I lost you there for a second. Sorry
together?
about that.
No
I had
worries.
somebody pull up out here in the yard. I had to go check it out real quick.
Oh,
I was trying to stay on audio only, but
Okay.
no, I heard you was talking about the college football playoff and the top 12 spots that I was wanting to talk about there.
Yeah, so I was just going through. We just put them up here in regards to the video graphic, and just in regards to, of course, Florida State has nothing to do with this year after being such a big deal and being right in the middle of all of it last year. But in terms of the ACC and Florida State's fight against the ACC and Florida State's argument that the ACC is devalued and not given the same cred, whether it's deserved or not, as the other conferences, kind of plays into your look at the ACC in these initial college football playoff rankings.
Yeah, look, we talked about it all off season. We got a lot of heck for it. Called this, called that. FSU was messed up and down the block for being Madonnas and babies and overrated and all these things. People laughed at us for not making the playoffs. And here we are, after all that talk, all the Big 12 test thumping that went on and things of that nature. And what do you see there, Mark? I see 4 SEC. I see 4 Big 10, 1 Mountain West, 1 Group 5, 1 ACC, and 1 independent. So what weight does the ACC conference hold, Mark? What benefit does Miami have to be in that conference? What benefit does Pitt have? If they were 8-0 as an independent or in the Mountain West, they'd be ranked higher. So it's tough. And, February 1st, that's the date ESPN has to extend. He's talked all this stuff. Oh, FSU's overrated. They don't mean that much to the ACC. Okay. ESPN has 4 SEC teams and 1 ACC. The next 2, SMU and Pitt, they wouldn't be in the top 10 of ratings or money for an SEC place. So why on God's green earth did ESPN give half the money or even close to that to the ACC? What do they give to the ACC? What they give to the SEC? Somebody will have to explain it to me. It makes zero fiscal sense, especially with 2 teams threatening to leave.
Yeah, so this is obvious a combination of football value on the field. You got to win the games to be in this discussion. But number 2, it's obviously this playoff committee's evaluation of how good you are in these games and their performances, the wins and the losses. Another thing that you're bringing up is obviously the television value, which is not reflected here. You can be SMU and not get flies to watch your games. But hey, if you've got a good football product and a good football team, then you're 8-1 or whatever they are right now.
Totally disagree.
And on the fringe. What's that?
I totally disagree. If SMU and Pitt had a good TV product, they'd be ranked in the top 10. Like,
Yeah,
Does,
I don't
does
think
do
you
any of
listened to
those
what I
SEC
don't think you
teams
listened to
besides
what I said. But anyway, yeah, I
you
don't
said
think.
you said the TV value doesn't represent in the college football playoff poll, that they're just ranking it on what's on the field. I'm arguing that is not the case.
Oh, I got you.
That it's absolutely to do with brand recognition. Just look at the top 10 and who's ranked and who's undefeated and who's got one loss and who's behind everybody. You see what I'm saying? That's the point I'm making. Like, it really doesn't matter what the hell happens. The rankings, the records of the conferences, they're all about the same. No matter what happens, if Florida State was good this year, it'd be Florida State up there because they would have beat Miami, and Miami would be down at 13 or 14. Clemson would have 3 losses because Florida State beat them too. Like, it seems like almost some of the stuff that you talk about in politics where people are on so polar opposite sides. Like, if I'm at ESPN, I don't see how, like, well, BYU, Boise State, Notre Dame, like, they're all, one's brand new in the Big 12, one's one's an independent, one's a Mountain West Conference. So, like, what does the ACC do at all? Like, they don't do anything. Like, it doesn't bring any value. FSU, Clemson, Miami bring value to the ACC. It's been diluted to the point now where it's like, even if you were a great football team in the ACC, maybe this is a sore subject. Sorry to interrupt you there. I had all kind of crazy stuff going on, but go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I think there is a. So if you look at SMU, you take SMU and you take their schedule, their results, what they've done, what they've accomplished, and transfer it to a blue blood. Who knows where they'd be ranked? We don't know. Same with Pitt.
I'm muted, but I looked at the one that I looked at had everybody's strength of schedule up underneath them. And there's zero difference in the top 12. They're all relatively the same, except for like Boise State, and BYU, I think is a little bit lower, but Georgia's number 1. The SECs are so far, it's not even a competition between the SEC and the Big 10. Like, Georgia's number 1, Alabama's number 5. Maybe that's true, but I also saw Vanderbilt, played all the best teams down to the wire, beat Alabama, all these things. So it's parity. Every other league sucks. With SEC, it's quality losses, just like it kind of always is, But what are you going to do? It's hard to argue it. Like, it was already a thing. Then you add 4 more power programs to each conference. Like, it's just, you have a power 2 and a G7. It's just what it is, unfortunately. Like, there's not much of an argument left. Like, the whole Big 12 conversation has completely died. If it wasn't for Colorado, boy howdy, what would they do? They would be BYU and Colorado. It's, college football is going to a rough spot. I'm just ready for it to. I wish there was some way to take all this out of it, all the auto bids and this conference gets that. But unfortunately, it's just the nature of it. There's too many teams. People wanted it to get fixed. I think looking at it now, we can all kind of say, dang, we didn't have it too bad back in the BCS era. My opinion anyways, because it's so convoluted. Like Indiana. They're undefeated. What's the difference in Indiana and Oregon? And Ohio State's got a loss in their head of them.
Yeah, well,
there's no difference except for the brand name. That's the only difference. They don't have.
Whoa. Ohio State's beaten Penn State. Indiana doesn't have a win anywhere close to Penn State.
They've got a better win, that's fair, but they've also got a loss.
Well, they get a loss to the number 1 team in the country that's undefeated.
But Indiana's sick.
And if I got to think, we don't know, but based on past rankings, that if Ohio State would have gone out to Oregon and got their doors blown off, they'd be ranked differently than going out there and losing by 1 point on the road to the number 1 team in the country, especially when they had the ball in field goal range to win the game. So basically, they're playing even. You could actually make a argument that Ohio State outplayed the point spread or outplayed the situation. If you lose by, if you believe in the 3-point weight given to home field advantage, especially in tough places to play, than actually Ohio State by losing by 1 point to the number one team, in which they, again, if they had one more second, they would have kicked the game-winning field goal. Then they played either an even game or they played better than Oregon, considering it was on the road. So I think a lot of weight is given to that loss if you lose like that. I'm trying to see a team on there that lost a bad game. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. They're 5-4. They're an okay team. That's kind of a different evaluation to me.
I just take for example Miami. Is Indiana's strength of schedule worse than Miami's? Is it a lot worse? I don't know. I don't know what Indiana gets out of being in the Big Ten. If they're going to be undefeated, I guess what they get is a couple spots ahead of Boise State and a couple of spots ahead of BYU. It's just, I think the college football playoff has gotten lost in the sauce with the brand names and history. You said it, and I think you meant this season with this game, but I think they look into the 10 years down, like they look at Blue Buds. It's just, maybe it's just me, but it just gives me a crappy feeling that, okay, if you really think Ohio State's that much better or Alabama's better than all these teams with 0-1 losses behind them, then let them keep winning games and show it. But now, what happened? Even if Indiana, if they don't play Ohio State this year, how do they get ahead of them? Even if it's if they keep winning, it sets a precedent that I can't stand, and I don't understand why so early in the season. It's why I hate the preseason polls. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe you wipe out the preseason polls and everybody starts at square one, and you just go off what you see on the field. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of stuff about the College Football Playoff Committee that they claim, and we can't know for sure, meaning that, number one, they're not affected by the polls. Number two, that they scrap the results every week and they start over and they build a new top 25 or a top 50 or whatever. Obviously, if you've got a top 25, they know who's 26 and 27 and 28, et cetera. So they're ranking a zillion teams. So I hope so this is what I think the answer is.
Just call it a power ranking. If it's just a power ranking, call it that.
Well, that's what it is, isn't it?
No, they call it the college football playoff selection, the poll. It's not supposed to be a power rating. Power ratings, they don't come, that's totally subjective.
The way they sell it is that it's basically a resume ranking, but it's combined with their football knowledge of telling you who the best teams are. It's a combination. There's a resume portion to it, but they also they've said from day one that they're also rating the football talent.
I think they do what you're talking about until it comes down time to put them in, and then like you said, there's no way to know because the process isn't shared. Then it's just all right, this is what we're going to do. Let's figure out the excuse, almost. Or all right, here's what ESPN said. We'll never know. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe they need to release the transcripts of those conversations or make them
public. That would be phenomenal.
I mean, that'd be great TV. Here's another one to do with the playoff. They had a conversation recently about the injuries. So somebody asked them, so does injuries count against you? And the guy's like, no, well, we don't count injuries against you, but we do look at your production. So if your running back is all your running production and you lose them, then hell yeah, it's just so convoluted and there's so much room for error. I think that's how we got into the 12-team playoff. It's almost like they wanted it to go that last way to make it go through or something. But I'm just glad that I'm not glad. I'm upset. I'm terribly upset about how Florida State season is, but I am a little bit happy to be able to be critical of this whole thing and not have to worry about actually getting left out because it's a pile of mess to me. I don't understand it.
Well, my personal rankings are somewhat different, but I do it differently. And I'm not defending the College Football Playoff Committee because I've certainly been very critical of them in the past. I just can't tell you for sure whether they're being completely honest and forthright because I think that those rankings are fairly reasonable. I have a few issues here and there. I think Texas is too high, and a few things there, but not by much. There's still a team that only lost to Georgia, but I do think that they're too high. And then obviously, when you are in charge of the rankings, then you could use the rankings to defend wins and losses based on your own bias and based on, you can make a circular argument and say, well, they got 4 ranked wins. Well, who did the rankings? You did. And so there's always that part of it too.
Yeah, Georgia and Alabama, especially Alabama, is just feeding on what they started the year with. I mean, 2 losses. And it's because, oh, well, you lost to big bad Georgia, but then Georgia about lost to Kentucky and they did lose to Bama. It's like, yeah, it all comes down to, obviously you have to win. You can't do what Florida State did. It doesn't matter where you start out if you do what Florida State did. But yeah, the beginning of the year rankings are so like, imagine if Pitt would have started in the top 10, where would they be right now? It wouldn't be 18th or whatever it is.
Okay. So this is where I'm not arguing with you, but I'm also not agreeing with you because I just don't know. What you're saying is that the college football playoff rankings are being impacted by the AP rankings.
The preseason rankings for sure. Yeah. Without a doubt.
Of course, none of us thought Pitt would do anything.
Exactly.
So are they impacted by that, or are they impacted by, it would have been more interesting in Pitt's case if we would have seen a rankings a week ago, but they just got annihilated by SMU, just got crushed. The game was 48-11 in the fourth quarter. They got steamrolled. So that's the committee's out there that they finally played somebody, and this is what happened. Otherwise, what is Pitt's best win?
But Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. It doesn't matter if it's close. They're a 500 ball club.
Yeah, but Vanderbilt's done a lot of good things outside of that game against.
So has SMU, though. I mean, but it's the ACC. They're the second best team in the conference.
But you're comparing a team that won. With Alabama, you're comparing a very close competitive game that went down to the last play of the game, basically, with Vanderbilt.
But a 500 team versus one who's going to be going to the conference title. Like, you lose close to the good teams, you're supposed to blow out the 500 teams. Like, I'm with you. Like, this isn't a big argument. It's just looking at it.
But
525. What, they're 4-3 or 5-4?
I think they're 5-3, aren't they?
Sorry, Vandy. I didn't mean to crap.
They go to 5-4.
I think I'm thinking of their conference record. Maybe they're like 4-3 in conference, and then like 7-3 overall, or something like that. 7-2.
Yeah, I think they're either 5-3 or 5-4 because everybody's played either 8 or 9 games. But to me, Vanderbilt's been outside of a game against Georgia State, which I don't know what happened there, but it's still Vandy. Let's not oversell them, but they've played really well this year. So
let me ask you this: so it was Vandy 7-3. They beat Bama. Okay, is Vandy ranked at all?
By me, they are. By I don't know that I can't. Are they ranked? No,
I don't think they are. Okay, so Alabama lose. If Alabama's record was the same as Vanderbilt's, where would they be? Because they're 12 with 2 losses, and one of them's to Vanderbilt.
Well, yeah, but you'd have to go through the whole schedule. You can't just. We'd have to look at Alabama's entire schedule versus Vanderbilt's entire schedule.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, you can. We can sit there and have that conversation, but
it's a resume ranking. Of course, you'd have to look at their whole schedule.
There's not enough schedule for 10 different. Like, Alabama's schedule isn't that much harder that they drop 10 spots for like Vandy's on like Alabama's schedule, and they beat them head to head. You see what I'm saying? Like, I get what you're saying. Like, absolutely, you have to look at it. But I don't have the information. I don't think either of us do well enough for all the teams on here to have that conversation. But overall, I'm just saying, like, brand name's the most important thing. It's just clear. Like, I don't
know who everybody lost to and who they beat that was significant. But yeah, well, the other thing that I don't know. I can't answer this question either about the committee. I know that it factors into my rankings heavily, Just because you're not in the top 25 doesn't mean you suddenly become a horrible football team. Like that there's only 25 good teams and then it suddenly falls off a cliff. No, there is a number 26. If they're doing their job, they could tell us who number 26 is, and 27 and 28 to some degree. They should be able to tell us about to 35 or 40 if they're doing their jobs.
40 teams. Yeah, I agree. There's 40 legitimate teams or somewhere about in there every year that can compete.
Because look at, let's see who's on the back end of this that's in the Power Four, like Kansas State, Colorado, 6-2, 7-2 teams. Texas A&M, they're 6-3, I believe. Like Louisville, 6-3. Louisville just beat Clemson, they're 6-3. They got to be just off of this top 25, I would think. South Carolina's the same. They got to be just off of this ranking, I would think. Iowa, teams like that. And flip a coin as to, the difference between number 18 in the country and number 28 in the country. Like, I think once you get to about, 16, 17, you can go from there for another 15 spots, and it's pretty much the same football team.
It's close. And that's kind of the point that I'm making. It's like, why can't you just give them the benefit of the doubt? If it's that close, why can't you give them their record? And over and over and over again, you see teams, the teams with the brand in the right conference lose and not moving the polls. You see the team without the brand lose one game and drop 10, 15 spots. And it's just, it's really clear, especially when you're not fighting and wanting your team to hop over other teams. You kind of see like, damn, I would be pissed if I was Indiana or this or that. Like, yeah, if we're doing a power rating, this and that, we know, Pitt doesn't have the players, this or that, but they never got ranked in 2020 until it was at the very end and they won the conference, championship. I would have been upset as a Pitt fan back then. It's just a reality. It's like almost not even worth arguing. Money is in the SEC and the Big Ten. They're going to get 4 picks eventually. It's going to be 4 each, regardless. And look, that's what it represents perfectly right now. 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 1 for the rest. It's just people had this idea that somehow there was going to be a P3 or a P4 or even, Big 12 or an ACC were going to be close and still compete. I think this season has proved that there's teams in every conference that could win. There's parity to where a Boise State or a BYU can be this good. But as far as the conference, yeah, there's the rest of them might as well just collude. Like the other 7 conferences might as well get together and have like a best division and a worst division or something, because you're just going to have to go undefeated, lose 1 game if you want a chance to get in, if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten. It's just how it's going to be. Unless you're in the ACC and you get lucky enough to play Clemson, Miami, Florida State, Notre Dame out of conference, etc., and you just have this freak schedule. There's too many teams. There's 18 teams, and the bottom 3/4 of it is not respected whatsoever, and for good reason. Don't make no mistake, for good reason. But yeah, I just think it's time for Florida State to get in the Big Ten if they want to continue to compete, and that's another reason why maybe recruiting is slipped. Maybe you lost track of these things. Maybe you didn't sue the NCAA like Tennessee did because you had 3 lawsuits open already. But yeah, I don't think there's any future. If you're going to stay in the ACC, you might as well join the Mountain West, go independent, or go to the big schools. I don't see any value in any team being in the ACC unless they are lesser than, unless they are Wake Forest, Syracuse, or a Pitt. And, for whatever reason, they can go undefeated or get to the ACC championship, they can get in. Florida State is an independent and they go 12-0 or 11-1, 10-2. They're probably in. Probably have a better chance as an independent than the ACC, just looking at what Notre Dame, the respect they get year in, year out.
Well, the 2 scenarios I see out there that are the most obvious to put together that could challenge this Big Ten and SEC 4-4 and get multiple teams from the ACC and or the Big 12 would be is that if SMU runs the table and they win the conference championship, obviously they're an auto bid and they knock Miami down to 12-1, that Miami still makes it at 12-1. I guess. I think they would.
You have to wonder.
Have to wait and see.
But yeah,
and then the other one would be pretty similar. Iowa State goes on a run. They win all their games. They get the auto bid because well, it doesn't really matter. If you get the auto bid, you get the auto bid. I was going to mention their record 7-1, but they beat BYU, who was undefeated, and knocked them down to one loss as a non-conference champion. Do they stay in the top 12 over Big Ten and SEC teams? That's what I want to see, just to see how far the committee's taking this approach. That's what I want to see. Those two things happen.
It's going to be real interesting to see the kind of flip, if they keep it more consistent this year, or if there's a big flip at the end, like last year. But yeah, it's terrible that Florida State doesn't get you get to be a part of it, man. Such a wide open year. But oh well, we'll get back up in there. We'll get back in that top 12 before it's all over. Who knows if it's going to be in the ACC or in the Big Ten or what? But yeah.
Scott Davis says college football is amazing. Anything can happen. Well, the one thing I will say about that, Scott, I appreciate people's perspective on the season. We're seeing all these crazy upsets. I really believe when we get to the playoff and these teams start playing each other, we're going to see a semifinal that's pretty much what we've seen in the past. I'm going to be surprised if BYU shows up at the college football semifinal, or Iowa State or SMU. My money's on Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, or something like that. My money is really, when it really comes down to it, it's not just anything can happen.
Yeah, I really worry, especially because the teams in that position are going to be playing a top 4 team coming off a bye week, or however. I don't know exactly how the time works, if there's a week in between them or whatever. But those teams on a bye after having all that time to get rested and everything, and they're the team that has way more depth. And then the Iowa State's going to maybe have to play a tough game in a quarter and then play at Alabama or a Georgia. Yeah, that's going to be really tough and set up for some blowouts for sure.
Well, only 2 of those teams are going to have a bye. Only the Big Ten champ and the SEC champ. The rest of those, they're going to have to play. Pardon me?
I thought it was the top 4. Holy crap.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying only 2 of these blue bloods are going to have buys. The other 2 are going to be the ACC champ and the Big 12 champ.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying, but I would count, if Miami makes it undefeated, like, I'd be worried about Iowa State if they had to play them on rest too. But, I see what you're saying. One will be Big 12, one will be ACC. But, yeah, your conference champions on a week of rest versus whoever has to come in there. Yeah, the ACC and the Big 12, if they're playing, Georgia as a 2 seed, they may be in trouble too, for sure. I see what you're saying.
I still think that the best place to be in this roundup, and we'll see how it plays out, I'm going to track this for years going forward, is to be the 5 seed. Because when you're the 5 seed, you're the best team in the SEC or the Big Ten. The second best team out of everybody else in the SEC and the Big Ten that didn't win the conference, you're whoever, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, that didn't win the conference, and you're going to play the 12 seed. You're going to play the worst team at home, and then you're going to play the worst conference champion, which is almost like a cupcake. I'm not saying they're a cupcake, but it's a drop down from the best teams in the country. That'll probably necessitate some butt whoopings, but who knows? Maybe we see some 12-5 upsets, with that. That is, you're definitely right. That's the biggest, since the top 4 seeds are out, there is no 1 versus 12 matchup. So 5 versus 12, that's by and far, that's the biggest spread by a long shot. So yeah, that'll definitely be an interesting game to watch for sure. George, appreciate you being here as always. Renegade Report, everyone. What's the next either content video or live stream you're going to do? Friday, 7 Eastern. We're going to do a show. Not sure exactly what the content of it will be. I'm still working on that, but we'll definitely do a show. There'll be a bit of a Notre Dame preview. But yeah, Friday, 7 Eastern. And then, of course, we'll be right back here on Saturday for the post-game show after the game, and then Tuesday. So, yeah, staying busy. That's the channel right there, the Renegade Report. We just did a show last night, really going in depth on the coaching changes. Got Tiny Hat and Deshaun's opinions on that. We really went through for about 40 minutes, all the kind of fine details. And then we hollered at each other for the last 30 minutes arguing about it. So
Good stuff. Go check that out. And yeah, I know I was a little scatterbrained, a little all over the place today, but yeah.
No, you're good.
Sure appreciate everybody joining
You're
us here on
good.
the Local College Football. And if you're not subscribed to the Renegade Report, we would really appreciate it. Help us get to 3,000.
There we go. All right, George. Good to see you, man.
Yes, sir.
You have a great weekend. And I don't know what to root for when it comes to Florida State. Maybe that they give you some kind of relief and shock Notre Dame on Saturday.
A miracle. Pray for a miracle. That's all.
All right. We'll catch everybody back here next Wednesday at 6 Eastern.